known to us, Reverend Daniel O'Connell. He comes from several generations of Disciple of Christ ministers. As a Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Daniel served churches in Danbury, Connecticut, St. Louis, Missouri, and Houston, Texas. One part of his biography that most interested me is he merged one strong and two weak churches into one church with 3 locations. Having worked for a year on trying to combine 2 churches with one minister and not succeeding, I am most impressed.
Good morning. It's good to be back here with you again today. So I don't have to tell you that it's happening again in 24 days. Now, you remember last time, 4 years ago, and especially the time before that, 8 years ago. 8 years ago next month. Because history will be made in 24 days, big history, and no matter how things turn out, it's going to be big. And you and I, we are either likely going to be very happy or very unhappy and upset. Nothing in between for most of us. Now, Words and Deeds of Prophetic Women and Men, the second UU source, and you can see the Unitarian Universalist sources on the back of your Sunday bulletin, can guide us. So there's a Unitarian minister, Theodore Parker. He published a collection of 10 sermons of religion 171 years ago, and he was referencing what he and many others thought was an impending American Civil War, where one half of the country, more or less, was literally going to go to war with the other half. And it was going to be about slavery. And it was going to happen in just a few years. Everybody knew that it was coming. There didn't seem to be any way out of it. He wrote, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one, and my eye reaches but a little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends toward justice." Other people have done variations of this, including Martin Luther King. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. This is important. In the heat and fever of the day and the days that are going to come, it's good to be able to just take a half a step back and realize the history that has been made. Now, how easy it is to forget that or let it not be of comfort when we are stuck in the muck and mud of lies and more lies. When there is more heat than light, when we awake in the middle of the night, fearful of the future for ourselves, for our loved ones, for those that we know who are already marginalized. What's in their future? 8 years ago next month. Maybe half the voters in the country woke up saying, "I have finally been heard." And another half woke up saying, "I have never, ever been so afraid for our country." How did this happen? Now me, I was completely taken by surprise. Completely. I had only listened to the news and read the polls and opinions of people that I was already inclined to agree with. In fact, I had written a sermon for that following Sunday with no expectation that things were going to turn out any differently. And guess what I had to do Wednesday morning? Off you go. I was completely taken by surprise. How did it happen? How did I and everybody I knew miss seeing it, this election of Mr. Trump? Maybe it happened because, as one commentator put it, Mr. Trump connected directly to the pains, fears, and frustrations of a nation that had been smacked around by globalization, terrorism, rapid demographic changes, and a technological revolution that enriched and enraptured the kids with stratospheric SAT scores, but left millions of Americans watching their jobs fall victim to the latest apps, overseas outsourcing, robots, and a stunning shift in the nature of commerce and in the nature of community. Why did I miss this? I missed it because I mostly surround myself with people who think and feel the way I do. I made the mistake of thinking my own viewpoint must be the right one. I grew up a religious liberal, I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and we kind of thought at the time that if only everyone knew what we knew, they would arrive at the same conclusions. And we never even questioned that. We didn't realize that that was one of our beliefs. And maybe lots of people do share our views. I just had no idea until that Wednesday morning 8 years ago that millions of people do not share my views around race, class, women's reproductive health, and the absolute bedrock necessity of being respectful of other people's religions, other people's gender identity, sexual orientation, all that stuff you just heard a little while ago. Now, I became more aware than I had ever been that I was living in a bit of a bubble. You know, I grew up UU, so I grew up without the idea that sex is inherently bad, that we are desperate sinners in the hands of an angry God, only worthy of eternal damnation in hellfire. Not knowing that a lot of other people did grow up with that. And they're walking around like normal people. And they think they're normal. They think I'm the odd one, right? So I know people believe this and that, but you know, I still have difficulty with this. 8 years ago, per exit polls, 29% of Latinos voted for Trump. 29%. Guess what that number is now that we've all lived through that? 39%. This is the world we live in. It's hard. It's hard for me to understand. It's hard for me to just wrap my mind around it. According to a university professor, the most important divide in that election, and maybe in this one, it was not an election between whites and non-whites. It was between those who are often referred to as educated voters and those who are referred to as working class voters, especially white men under 50, no college degree. The reality is that 6 in 10 Americans, 60%, do not have college degrees. 60%. And they elected Donald Trump. College-educated people didn't just fail to see this coming, they have struggled to display even a rudimentary understanding of the worldviews of those who voted for Trump. This is an indictment of the insulated political culture in the vast majority of our colleges and universities. That's from the Washington Post. If I was so ignorant, if I was so blindsided as to how this could happen, and if my previous assumptions about America and who we are now completely and totally called into question, well, then what else am I ignorant about? I mean, that was a freight train that came through. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. What else is coming down the line? This is a dizzying path into darkness. Right after that election, I don't know if you remember, 8 years ago, all over the country, middle school kids started holding up pictures of Mr. Trump with captions like, "Make America White Again." Overnight. Latino kids are crying, bullying gets on the rise, intolerance, racism rears its ugly head, no longer having to hide, and the path goes down further. Well, now what happens this time? We're asking the same questions we asked 8 years ago. When will the mass deportations begin? Will millions of Americans lose access to health care? Will all abortions be outlawed? Will gay marriage be overturned? Will women lose even more control of their own bodies? Last time, Mr. Trump appointed 4,000 federal jobs, including 234 judges, 3 Supreme Court judges. what's going to happen for protection for transgender people? I have transgender folks in my family. What will happen to the poor, the already marginalized? What is going to happen to the Muslims? What's going to happen to LGBTQIA plus folks? See, this is how ignorant I am. What's going to happen to climate change? What's going to happen to science? And if we speak out against hate in that environment, what's going to happen to us? I want to move out of darkness. This thing is coming. Ready or not, how are we going to not only survive, but thrive in this kind of environment? Have you ever had a flashlight with dying batteries in it? And you turn it on and it's in the dark, it's not working, but maybe you get a flash. And then it goes out again. But in that oh so brief flash, you can't see very far, but maybe far enough to take a few steps in the direction you think you ought to go. And in our journey, despite a sense of impending darkness, we may see far off a beacon that liberal religion guides us. And we smile, knowing that we are welcome. That light is drawing us forward. We come to this fellowship. We come to join other travelers. Because despite the outer darkness, we strike a spark, and as sure as the sun will rise again, when we join our own small light together with others, we light up a whole room. In this room, we look up to a wider vision. And here we sing not alone. We sing with friendly voices, sometimes in rounds. And here together today, even in those moments just before the service starts, together we lean in to a stronger, welcoming silence. We magnify our senses. We look not at the immediate reality, not at augmented reality, but we look at who we want to be and how we want the world to be and what we can do to make that happen. Now, faith eyes, I mean letting our vision see beyond the present darkness that is in front of us. It was faith eyes that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams used to imagine a new country. In America, where all men are created equal and have the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it was faith eyes that Susan B. Anthony and others used to imagine America where those rights were extended to women, so women could vote, own property, control their own bodies. It was faith eyes that Martin King used to imagine America where these rights were extended to people of color, to abolish racial segregation. And it is faith eyes we use now to imagine an America that actually lives up to its promise, an America where we affirm and promote marriage equality, interfaith respect, women's reproductive health, and multiculturalism. Faith Eyes sees future possibilities, the future we want to co-create. For the most part, the eyes we have work well for us. But in darkness, we don't see so well. There is much less color, less detail. But if we look hard, we can usually find light, even in shadows. All of the shadows that you encounter contain some small amount of light. Shadows are filled with light reflected from the sky because otherwise they would be completely black. And just so, there is always some light to be found if you have what I'm calling faith eyes. Even in our shadow times, our times of failure and disappointment, the Spirit of life bounces some light into our darkness. Sometimes I'm kind of slapped around by the Spirit of life, and I need a whole new way of seeing. I get so busy, I don't realize I'm squinting at the world. And that's why the world looks dark and fuzzy. It's not the world, it's me. It's the way I'm looking at it. My gaze gets clouded with cynicism or despair. The eyes of cynicism are a form of squinting. We want to overlook the good. We see the glass half empty. We doubt everything. The lights dim, the floors tremble, and so we look down and we curse the puddles drenching our shoes and never notice, oh, there's a rainbow, which I didn't see because I was too busy complaining. Once upon a time, it was a dark and rainy day in Chicago. The sky was covered with thick overcast. The day, middle of the day, dark and gloomy and moody and rainy. And as the airplane that I was in took off, we went up, up, up. And you know, when you're in the clouds, sometimes it can get a little bouncy. And then the amazing thing happened. We entered this thick carpet of gray clouds. And when we were in these clouds, we were just enclosed in this milky nothingness. You could barely see the wingtip out the window. It was hard to tell up from down, right from left, and even how fast we were going. We had the darkness below, and we were moving through these soggy gray clouds, and for a few moments, after a few moments, we came up through the top of the clouds. It was another world. It was blindingly brilliant once we got above those clouds. Perspective of just a few thousand feet made all the difference. We could see 50 miles, no problem. And we flew above this puffy carpet of clouds. It just looked like a rumpled blanket of snow. And then an hour or so later, when we came in to land in St. Louis, we descended back through the clouds again, a few bumps here and there, and then back into the gray and wet, real world of being on the ground, dark and gloomy and cloudy and wet. Here again, the weather was dark and moody. Now, which world was real? The one above, I could see 50 miles, bright, blindingly bright, or the world that I'm standing in now that's going to get my feet wet? Now, in the gray, wet darkness close to the ground, I could barely imagine something brighter. And when we are in deep darkness, it is hard to remember the snowy brilliance that's just above our heads. When I get depressed about the present day, about what's going to happen in 24 days, you know, half the country is going to be upset. It doesn't even matter who wins as far as people being upset with us. When I get depressed about that, when I fear the present darkness is closing in, when I smell the storms getting near, when I worry that darkness will not end anytime soon, that's when I need to lift up my gaze above the current clouds. And I recall our history. And it reminds me that there is a bright sun. Even though I cannot see that bright sun at night, that beacon is always there. I use a new lens, the lens of history. The words and deeds of prophetic women and men, they speak to us still. They remind us that the things that they thought were impossible became a reality because they worked together to bring it about. Through the work of their sweat, the fire of their thought, and the compassion of their heart, our spiritual forebears freed the slaves, got the vote for women, and helped create public schools. They used faith eyes to create what others would not see. Faith eyes saw the end of slavery when it seemed impossible, interracial marriage when it was still illegal. Faith eyes saw marriage equality for gays and lesbians even in the dark prejudice of discrimination. And your spiritual homework this week is two things. One is to try and help develop your faith eyes. First is to make a positive contribution. Volunteer for one thing. Now, I know some of you are already doing this, but just one thing, make an effort. When you look for an opportunity that fits you, you will find it. There are so many ways to live out your values. This is especially important when those values are threatened, which they are right now. Just do one thing. Volunteer for one thing. I noticed this morning that Access Care Coastal Texas has a volunteer director. I don't know, I'm guessing when the service is over, you could talk to somebody and sometimes it's like, yeah, I should volunteer, I should do this, and then all of a sudden, whew, it's right there. That's one of the wonderful things about a congregation like this is people put opportunities together for you. And all you have to do is sign up, show up, and give yourself a pat on the back when you're done. Make a positive contribution. The second piece of homework is to remember that no matter how dark the days ahead seem, and they're probably going to get darker, they're also going to get brighter. It's important to get perspective. And back in Emerson's day, they had this thing that they called to go marveling. Like to be amazed, to go to marvel. What does it mean? It means to get off your chair, turn off your phone, take a walk outside. Look for the marvels in the natural world, just outside your doors. There's a lot there if you just open your eyes. Getting on your hands and knees is actually a good way to start. Bringing back a small token will help you remember the story of your marvel, and taking along small children really helps because they will almost always want to pick something up, and they will help you see things you might otherwise miss. No matter how dark the world stage seems to get, there is light in the very shadows around us if we know how to look. No matter how clouded and downcast our gaze becomes, above the dark and grumbling skies, there is a bright world that beckons us to look up and wonder. The dark days are going to come and they're going to go, and let us not double over at bad news, but double down on our work for an earth made fair and all her people one. When we choose to see with faith eyes, when we choose to see and seek possibility, we will seek and find marvels and wonders. We will find ways to bring about the world we have always wanted. May you fill your spiritual batteries with wonder this week. May you go a-marveling. And most of all, as you build this haven for religious liberals, as you build this beacon for liberal religion, let us find wonder in each other. Let it be so. And amen.